This is Unit 7, Day 10. We're going to talk about area, perimeter, and how they relate with similar polygons. So for this to start, I have just drawn three rectangles that are all similar rectangles. And if you remember what similar means, basically all of their angles are the same and their sides are proportional. Meaning for the first part here we've got a 3 and obviously it changes to a 6. That means it's being doubled. Same with the 4 and the 8 for that one. If we were to go from the original one, I've labeled it 1 and 2. So from the original one to the number 2, going from 3 to 9, we're actually multiplying by 3. And that's also the same from going from 4 to 12. We're also multiplying by 3. So these are proportional. So that means they're similar. If I were to write out, first of all, their perimeters and areas, I've already done that over here. The perimeter of the first one is 14 because this is 3, 4. This one would also be 3, and that one would also be 4. And those all add up to 14. And then the perimeter of the next one is 28. And the next one, and this one down here is 42 if you were to add up 9, 12, 9, and 12 for that one. So I've already gone through all of that work. And then lastly, I found the area of them. So this one would be 3 times 4 to start, which would give me 12, and then 48, and then 108, respectively there. Okay, moving on. I'm now showing you how they relate. So going from 1 to the original, I was setting up proportions for this, or ratios, I should say. Basically how I did this was I saw from 1 to the original for their scale factors. This was 1, and this was the original. I did 6 to 3, or 6 over 3. I just set it up as a fraction because that's how you can set up some ratios. So 6 over 3 is coming directly from those shapes. And then I just simplified that to 2 over 1. Same thing for 2 to the original. So down here you can see I have 9 to 3, which I have as my fraction over here, 9 over 3. And then I simplified that to equal 3 over 1. The ratios of their perimeters, all I have to do is look at my chart now to figure out my ratios of perimeters. My perimeter was 28 to 14 for the first one. That's why I have that fraction there. And then my ratio for the other one was 42 over 14. That's coming from here and here to make that. And I simplified all of those, and basically this is kind of what the lesson is saying today. It's kind of crazy to think that the ratio of the scale factor and the ratio of the perimeter, if you simplify them both, they're equal to each other. So that's kind of cool. And then, yeah, it's obviously true down here as well. Those are equal to each other after you simplify the ratios of those two things. The last thing we need to talk about here is the ratio of their areas. So the ratio of those areas, if I had 48 and 12 as my fraction, and I simplified that, I'd get a 4 over 1. If I simplified the ratio for the 108 and the 12, I would get this, and I would simplify that to get 9 over 1. And so how can we figure out a way to relate these? Well, it turns out that this fraction is whatever we got for our ratio fraction just squared. So 2 squared is 4, and the bottom 1 squared is 1, so we have 4 over 1. Same thing is true down here. 3 squared is 9. So that's a lot of stuff. That's kind of a pretty big intro, but this is the basis of the lesson. If your scale factor, if you can set it up as a fraction, we'll call it a over b. The perimeter is the exact same ratio or fraction, a over b. The ratio of their areas, you have to find, basically use their perimeter or their scale factor and square them. So let's go through some examples here. Number 1, I can see what we have here is our scale factors. We have numbers for both of those. So that's what we're going to have to use to kind of set up everything that we do here. You have to look for that first every time. So my scale factors were 8 and 9. So I'm going to set up my proportion as 8 and 9 as the tops of some fractions here. You can set it up a couple different ways. Like if you wanted to put the 8 over the 9 like we were doing up here, that's fine. I just think this is a better look, and it works the exact same. So this is how I do these problems. 8 over 9 would be on the top. I just like to keep it separate. Like this would be like figure 1. And this would be figure 2. Like that. And with that being said, then we can fill in another piece that we know. So for example, let's look at our perimeter. So our perimeter was 32. So I'm going to take that 32, and since that's under figure 1, I'll put it on my figure 1 side. So right there. I don't know the perimeter of figure 2. That's what I'm trying to find, so I'll put an X there. And now with that, we can cross multiply to figure out what X equals. So it's going to take me a second to do that. I got 36. So X equals 36. And that would go right there. Okay, so that first one's done. Now we need to look at the area of figure 1. We're trying to find that next. To do that, I can't set it up with 8 over 9 on the tops of my fractions again, because we said if we're doing our area ratio, we need to square the scale factor. So we need to take 8 and 9 and square them, which would give me 64 and 81. I'm just taking these numbers and squaring them to get 64 and 81, and then I can put my areas on the bottom. Well, since we were given the area of figure 2 as 243, we'll put it there, and we will figure out the area of figure 1 by cross multiplying again. I got 192. So this one would be 192. And that's it for the first one. Now they're all going to be a little bit different. You're not always going to get your scale factors to start. So for example, right here, we got our areas to start. Now if I thought about this like we were doing at the beginning, we're actually going to have to set it up like this to start. We're going to set it up as a fraction, just to kind of simplify those numbers, because those numbers are pretty big, and we can't work with numbers that big. So 150 over 216, if I were to simplify this, it's going to take a second for me here. It's going to be... Okay, so I think it's 25 over 36 if I were to simplify this fraction. And the reason I needed to simplify it was because now I can see if I simplified it, I've got some perfect squares here. I've got 25 and 36, which is going to be good, because if I were to square root those are the same thing as 5 squared over 6 squared, which is nice because our area ratio, if we looked at our template up here, our area ratio is a squared over b squared, which means we know now our perimeter and our scale factor because we have our a and our b. So let me set this up now. 5 and 6 are the two numbers we're going to use. Oops, I'm going to actually set it up this way now. Like that, 5 and 6. And then if I wanted to find, let's do the perimeter first. If I wanted the perimeter, we've got the perimeter of figure 1 as 30. And there we go. So 6 times 30 divided by 5 would be my cross multiplication. Which is 36. So 36 would go there. X equals 36. And then for my scale factor, these two right there, it's giving us our scale factor of the 1 to be 6. So we know that the other one has to be 5 because that's what we're using right there, the 5 and the 6. So if one of them's 6, the other one has to be 5. Okay, number 3. What are they giving us this time? They're giving us our perimeter again. So that's our perimeter ratio. If we were to simplify that as a fraction, 36 over 20, for example, we would get 9 over 5, I believe. And that would be basically our scale factor, just by simplifying it. We don't have to do any square roots on this one because perimeter and scale factor are the same. But I actually know this right off the bat is going to be 9 down there because we see the 5 there as well. So 9 over 5, that means figure 1 must have a scale factor of 9. And then if we are trying to set up our proportion for area, if we have that 9 and the 5, we're going to have to square them. So we'll get 81 over something equals 5 over something. Oh no, 25 over something because we got to square it. And that something is going to be 243 and x. Okay, let's see. So 25 times 243 divided by 81 is 75. And that is it for this lesson. There's your Alex